It is 12 on the dot. We are recording and we are going to get going here. We got our guest host coming in, Tom Glines. We're trying to get him into the talk, and I'm getting texts that he's here, but I'm not seeing him. So let me see. Stand by.
James, while you're working on that, I'll just remind people that I did put a couple polling questions in there, so I'll open that after the program and the talk. And if anybody wants to follow along in the media viewer on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, the little three dots there, the ellipses, you can click on media viewer there, open that up, and you can follow along. And also, if you have any questions for James or Tom, please put them in the Q&A section. So.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be working on addressing those. If you have questions, please focus your attention on that Q&A window frame. We try to reserve the chat for links and stuff to go out to everybody. So if you do have a question, it's a lot easier for us to navigate that Q&A where we're at. So let me see. Still not seeing Tom just yet. So trying to get him on. Apologies for this.
Maybe I'll just go in here and open the polling right now and we can get some polling questions going.
Let's go ahead and do that.
So I'm going to open that now. So if anybody wants to click on the three ellipses again and just open up polling, I just opened it up. So you should be able to click on there. Just three questions if you've hunted turkeys or if you've been successful in the lottery or what your favorite method is. Answer that, we'd appreciate that. We get all kinds of people jumping in today. That's awesome. Well, I'm kind of excited about turkey season this year too. So I got my turkey permits. I like to live across the border a little bit and hunt in Wisconsin too. So we just got our turkey permits in this week. So ready to go.
Fantastic. So yeah, Benji, you get to, in Wisconsin, you can basically get a whole lot of birds if you get to the over-the-counter tags quick enough.
Yeah, when they start releasing those, you got to be standing at the line of Flea Farm in town here. So
nice.
My daughter's getting excited about it too. One wants to try archery hunting for turkeys, which I'm kind of curious in the polls here how many people have done that. It looks like there's 8 people so far that have answered that poll question that have been out archery hunting for turkeys. That's a awesome challenge. I've never been successful with a bow and arrow on my turkeys, so I try that down in southern Minnesota this year too. So
Nice. Yeah, it's a different animal, pun intended. You know, it's a lot different strategies. You know, you really got to close that distance with the archery equipment. So, just a quick update. I am in contact with Tom. He's having a little bit of technical difficulty getting into WebEx, but I'm hoping that he is en route. So,
All right. Keep an eye on the list here. See, there we see him.
there he is. Tom, you there?
I'm here.
Excellent. Well, the commute is heck. I tell you what. Traffic. The inner tubes are pretty crowded these days. So, thank you for bearing with us and coming on. And we're gonna get going. So we got folks online. They're doing a quick poll talking about how many of them have experience going turkey hunting and what their process is. You know, we've had about 17 out of 74 folks right now that have gone turkey hunting. Well, there's 18. There's one more. And in terms of what they use, we'll kind of go over that in a little bit. But let's get started with our talk because we got a lot to cover. We got stories from Tom to share with everybody, and we're gonna get rolling. So, all right. Okay. Welcome everybody. My name is James Burnham. This is the Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series, and we are talking today about 50 years of wild turkeys in Minnesota. I am the Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Coordinator for the state of Minnesota. Basically, that means my job is to try to get more people out hunting and fishing and enjoying the great outdoors in Minnesota. And with us today is Tom Glines, the National Wild Turkey Federation Director of Development. Tom, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Well, good morning. Sorry about the delay. When we test ran this, we were on Microsoft Teams, and I had a little glitch getting into Cisco. But what you just said, James, about your job is to get more people out turkey hunting, it just comes quickly to mind when I took the role of employee of the National Wild Turkey Federation in 1994. I had a lot of people say, Tom, don't tell anybody about turkey hunting. It's like back in those days, you had to draw a tag, and people did not want more wild turkey enthusiasts to diminish their chances of drawing the coveted wild turkey tag.
That's right. We've come a long way. It has been a lot's changed, and we're going to get into that whole story. So, for those of you that are new to this webinar format, this is a weekly series that we put on through the Division of Fish and Wildlife Outreach section. We're talking about different topics every week, and it's all about sharing what we know, connecting our audience to people that are experts in the field, giving folks a chance to ask questions in real time and engage with the people that know this stuff. Today, we're going to be talking about the reintroduction of the wild turkey to Minnesota 50 years ago this year, and how you can get involved with this amazing activity. These webinars are always Wednesdays at noon. This is the 101st episode. Our very first episode was about turkeys. Our 101st episode is about turkeys. I enjoy that. Our upcoming topics, it's very bird centric. You know, our spring series, this is the first webinar of our spring series. We're talking prairie chickens, backyard bird feedings. We got turkey calling techniques coming up on the 5th, trout stream easements, the peregrine falcon story. So very, you know, for all the bird nerds that are out there, this is a good set of weeks coming up for the webinar. In addition to talking about large mammals like bison, and some really good fishing stories coming up. So that's what's coming up in future series. You can get to our registration page and check out this stuff, and let your friends know. If you know somebody who's really crazy about loons, loony for loons, you know, we got a good webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. So share the knowledge, share the love, and we'll see y'all on here. So This talk today is about the reintroduction of the wild turkey to Minnesota. And for a lot of folks, especially, my age and younger, it's kind of hard to conceive of the fact that 50 years ago, we didn't have wild turkeys in Minnesota. They just weren't here. And, you see them in downtown St. Paul, you see them in downtown Minneapolis, you see them everywhere in the state. And that's a tremendous thing to celebrate, because wild turkeys are one of the great conservation success stories in the United States. The big book of conservation success stories is pretty thin. It's not that big of a book. Conservation is a hard field to be in sometimes, because it can be it's tough work. But turkeys are a success. It's a story to be celebrated, and the success in Minnesota is rooted very much so in these very strong partnerships between the Department of Natural Resources, the National Wild Turkey Federation, and dedicated volunteers across the state who brought those birds back and got them reestablished in the state. And now we have these birds in the landscape to hunt, to watch, to listen, to chase away from our bird feeders. They're just it's so amazing to have that be here now, because not too long ago that wasn't the case.
Well, James, just touching briefly on that, I got bit by the wild turkey bug in 1985, in the early days of the wild turkey in Minnesota, and then I was bit so much that they actually hired me on in 1994, and when I started employment with the NWTF, we covered the early history of the NWTF beginning in 1973. Well, in 1973, when the organization was founded, there were only huntable populations of turkeys in 18 states, predominantly all of those eastern U.S., but I think there were some small populations in the Rocky Mountains, possibly even including the Black Hills of South Dakota, that had pockets of Merriam's.
Nice. Yeah, I am I grew up down south. I did not grow up turkey hunting. I came to turkey hunting as an adult in Wisconsin, and have continued that on here in Minnesota. And so, as somebody who has come to turkey hunting after a lot of this work has been done, and after a lot of this effort has been exerted, it is just, I can't, all of the folks that have put their shoulder to this, it's just tremendous, because we are now in a golden age of turkey hunting in the Midwest, and it is 100% because of the work that's been done by organizations like the Turkey Federation, by state agencies, and by committed people around the country that value this stuff. So real quick, here's some quick facts about wild turkeys. They've been in the fossil record for at least 10 million years. These are an old lineage of birds. Historically, in the fossil record, there's some debate about how many different species there were in this taxa. The current consensus is that there are two distinct species of turkeys. We have the wild turkey here in North America, and then there's the ocellated turkey down in the Yucatan Peninsula. And that wild turkey species that we have has 5 subspecies. So there are color variants across the country on where you're going, and a little bit of behavior differences between which of those subspecies that you're looking at.
Say, James,
and
that turkey off to my shoulder there, the full strut one, is a Gould's wild turkey from Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico.
Mhm.
The one on the wall a little bit above that is the ocellated that you claims not a subspecies, but a different turkey all by itself. But that was from the jungles down by the Guatemala border.
There you go. Yeah, and after we get done with the slideshow, we'll be able to, our images will be bigger, and it'll be a little easier to see that stuff. But yeah, keep an eye on that, because that ocellated is hovering right over Tom's shoulder in his image. And it's not me claiming that it's a separate species. That's the people who get paid to think about what species is a species. So that those taxonomists, they get to have rigorous debates over whether it's 1 or 2 or 7 or however many. But before European settlement, there are estimates of between 7 and 10 million turkeys in North America. These have been a major source of food for human communities for generations upon generations upon generations. There have been some, trash pits that have been unearthed from indigenous communities where, the dominant bones that were in there were deer bones, but the second most prevalent bones were turkey bones. So these birds have been really strongly related to sustaining people on the North American landscape for millennia. In the 1800s and early 1900s, however, it was a similar story. Over and over again, we hear about the unregulated market hunters that came in and wiped stuff out, whole-scale habitat loss and clearing, really put a hurt on a lot of these populations. And in that early 20th century, we saw a lot of states lose their turkeys. I think the last one was recorded in Minnesota around 1907, 1906. And by 1920, there were only 18 of the original 39 states that had documented turkey populations. 18 of those 39 had lost their turkeys entirely, and Minnesota and Wisconsin and the whole Midwest were among those. Almost as soon as Minnesota lost our wild turkeys, people were trying to bring them back. But they were really kind of they were unorganized efforts. They weren't they weren't effective at all. And there were multiple attempts between the 1920s and 1950s to release these pen-raised birds. So these are birds kind of like pheasants. You hatch them in captivity, you raise them in pens, and then you release them out into the wild. And it wasn't a good strategy for turkeys. There was a small-scale attempt to release some Miriams at Whitewater WMA, and Tom, you know more about that.
Not a lot about that. That's a little bit before my time.
Okay. But these attempts failed because pen-raised birds they were bad at foraging. When you're in a pen and food is brought to you, you don't really have to learn how to find it on your own. They were bad at avoiding predators, and they were bad at nesting. So it really didn't take, because these pen-raised birds, they didn't have the skills to cut it in the wild. In 1973, there was a pivot, and there was a little bit of a coordinated organization around, okay, what are we doing here? How are we going to do it? And the DNR got involved, and partner organizations and individuals got involved. But Minnesota started talking with Missouri about trapping and relocating adult wild birds. So trapping wild adults in Missouri and bringing them up to Minnesota. Minnesota traded 85 grouse for 29 turkeys. So that's the turkey to grouse ratio. If you want to standardized grouse units, I guess. But we got 29 turkeys we got 29 of their turkeys, and they got 85 of our grouse. Tom, you let me know, but I'm willing to bet large amounts of money that our turkeys are doing better than their grouse population is doing.
I agree with that. And I think there was even some pine marten were in that early trade. I think it was easier for Minnesota DNR that catch pine marten and translocate them to Missouri. But if you could look at those boxes on that slide there too, it said Target 2000. So when the NWTF was founded, one of their initiatives was a program called Target 2000, where they wanted to have turkey populations seeded all over the nation and complete the program by the year 2000. And that worked pretty good. In Minnesota, we actually continued translocation efforts through 2009. And so that tended to be better, releasing truly wild birds into the wild in new locations, because obviously turkeys don't migrate. Their
Right.
population expands. They're not like waterfowl, so you had to physically move them from one place to another.
Yep. And these release points, the original release points, were in the southeastern part of the state, and so Caledonia and Houston County was the site of the original release. And Tom, you said back in the day there was the line of death. Can you talk about that?
Well, there is this historical line of death that wildlife officials believed that turkeys would never survive above a line, it's an imaginary line that had over 12 inches of snow for over 30 days in the winter. And that line pretty much followed Interstate 94 in Minnesota. And as we went along, we did release spurts above that. We did a lot of different research projects. The NWTF funded them with different universities. I know one was in Mille Lacs County. There was also another one in Chisago County. And probably the most recent one was up in the Thief River Falls area. And I I was sitting on the committee trying to encourage them to do it. I said, just try it, research it. I believed in my heart that turkeys would survive all the way up in that Pennington County area, and they're surviving to this day.
It's fantastic. So we're talking about this trap and transporting that Tom was just referring to. You know, once the DNR and Turkey Federation and volunteers, once they got that population established in around Caledonia, they started grabbing birds from that population and trucking them out to different parts of the state. This happened, like Tom said, it started in the mid 70s and continued on until 2009. And during that time, over 5,000 turkeys were trapped and relocated to other areas of the state, with almost all of them descended from those original 29 birds that got brought in. Now there's some fuzziness there. There's some stragglers coming over from other states. You know, Wisconsin started their reintroduction efforts in the late 70s, and they had multiple swaps from the Missouri birds as well. So they had a slightly different strategy, and Tom indicated that there were some birds that were brought up from Illinois and released around the Carlos Avery area at one point. But the vast majority of the birds that are in Minnesota come from that original 29, those original
James,
29
James,
birds
I
that were
just want
released.
to point out too that there is a recent article in the Star Tribune that it was in print that they said the 5,000 birds came from out of state, and it's like, I just want to go on record that that statement in that article in the Star Tribune was incorrect. The writer had it wrong. These are 5,000 birds translocated within Minnesota. At one point in the 2000s and the 90s, the DNR was having a semi-annual meeting and they'd discuss all of the potential release sites. I've got a hard copy document somewhere in my files. It's not digital, because back in those days we didn't have digital files to share. It was a hard copy that I got from the meetings with the DNR, and at some point soon I'm going to locate that and share that back with you.
I appreciate that. That'd be awesome to see. So, you know, we reintroduced birds in 1973. By 1978, we were able to actually have the first modern hunt in Minnesota. So that was the first time in several decades that birds have been hunted in the state. There were literally 2 spots in the state that you could register their birds. So again, as somebody who's come into this in later in life, you know, I don't have to register my bird. Nobody cares about my bird anymore. But back then, in that first time, everybody wanted to see the birds. You know, the measurements were taken, they were weighed, spurs were measured. You know, they were taking all of this data so that they could evaluate the program and evaluate how good the birds were doing out in the wild. And there were only 2 spots to do this, and that was in Caledonia and the Whitewater Wildlife Management Area Office. That first hunt, there were 94 birds registered, and that's about a 20% success rate. And so Tom shared with me earlier, so that means about 420 people in the state got to hunt that first year.
There were 5,000 applicants that first year.
Wow.
So it just shows you how hard it was to get a tag in those early days.
And just how hungry people were to do it, like how much people wanted to go out and chase after these gobblers. So yeah.
And the only information you could find on how to hunt them was on VHS tapes or cassette.
Nice. Since those early days, since that first initial 420 licenses that went out, we've seen a good amount of growth in turkey hunting. The COVID hit in 2020 right before turkey season, so that's kind of the explanation for that real big jump up in 2020. You know, Tom and I were planning the governor's mentor turkey hunt on a Friday, and on a Monday, I was told go home for 2 weeks, and we've seen how that's gone. But that meant a lot of people were home in spring 2020. That meant a lot of people had more time than they thought they might have, and we saw a lot more folks in the woods chasing turkeys after that. So
One of the cool things I remember about that, James, too, is I heard story after story of high school kids that weren't attending class, that were mentoring friends because now they had all this extra time, and they just said, "Hey, Bobby, you want to go tomorrow? I got a spot." Or so.
right, yeah, yeah. So in addition to the revenue that's generated from those license sales, it goes towards habitat management, wildlife management. We have two other funding streams for turkey conservation here in Minnesota. We have our collectible stamps that you can get. That every year it's a different stamp and different artists, and so it's similar to our trout stamps, our walleye stamps, our pheasant stamps. So that money goes towards turkey conservation and management. And then that was initiated in 1997. And then in 2016, I mean, honestly, not that long ago, I was genuinely surprised that it was this recent, but we got that turkey license plate that got put into place, and that sends money to the Reinvest in Minnesota Fund, and that helps fund a wide variety of habitat improvement projects across the state. And Tom, you were involved in both of those efforts.
Well, I'm going to tell you about both of those. Like I said, in 1994, I went to work for the NWTF. And one of the one of the very first things I was told by the DNR is, "We're done trapping." And it's like, "What? What? We're not done. We haven't scratched the surface of where turkeys can survive and thrive." And so I thought we need, and they cited the reason for it. They didn't have a budget for it. It's like we didn't have money. I said, "Well, let's do a turkey stamp." And they kind of said, "We don't like dedicated accounts." And I said, "I don't care. I would like to see a turkey stamp." So I called my local legislator. I live in Anoka County. My legislator was State Representative Tom Hackbarth. And he said, "Tom, let's do this." And he found Senator Gene Merriam, also from Coon Rapids, and they wrote companion pieces and drafted the legislation for the turkey stamp. So that's why we have that. So several years later, you see in 2016, and it must have been in 2015, State Representative Tom Hackbarth was in his office at the Capitol saying, and he picked up the phone and called me and said, "Tom, what can I do for the turkeys?" And so I said, "How about a license plate?" He said, "Okay, we'll draft it up." So it's amazing sometimes how easy, if you have the right friends in the right places, that you can get things done. And yeah, both of those have really raised countless thousands of dollars for wild turkey work within Minnesota. I'm only a little disappointed that we didn't write it in the legislation to keep my plate. My plate on my truck for 6 years was AA001. And I found out that after 6 years, you have to get a new plate. And they did not give me 001 back. But whatever. It's in my trophy case. So
There you go. Fantastic. So that's kind of just a quick overview of, why turkeys disappeared off the landscape, how they came back, some of the things that are interesting about them, some of the efforts that have gone in to fund their conservation. If you're interested in this, if you're somebody who's watching this and you've never gone turkey hunting before, there's some things that you can do to get in the game. I mean, honestly, it's my favorite thing to do in the woods. The spring is an amazing time to be out there. Minnesota has just such a tremendous transition. We start turkey season this year. It's the middle of April, April 13th, and is opener. So we go from April 13th to May 31st, and that means in Minnesota you can go from hunting on 10 inches of snow to hunting in 100-degree weather. And every week it's different out in those woods. Every week the birds are different out in those woods. Every week you're seeing something different out in those woods. And it is just a tremendous time to be out there. And I'm never bored. I'm never sorry I go out. I'm never complaining to myself about it. It's tremendous. So if you want to get into the game, we have over 4 hours of online educational content and a how-to page on our website. And if you wanted to do a search, you could just look for MNDNR, Learn to Turkey Hunt, and you'll get to those resources. The National Wild Turkey Federation organizes mentored hunts around the state, and this year that's going to be on April 15th. Different chapters and hunt locations have different priorities. So some are for youth only, some are for adults, some are for veterans. So depending on where you're at and where the hunt is at, it might affect involvement. But those opportunities are going to be happening statewide, and Minnesota has one of the more aggressive statewide mentored hunts. Is that correct, Tom?
That is correct. We kicked him off with a pilot program probably 15 years ago in the Southwest metro area. And at that time, we were hunting the Minnesota River Valley Refuge down there. We had special permission to do that, but now we've had chapters all over the state embrace the mentored turkey hunt program, and some chapters have bigger hunts than others. And at one point, we were trying to be restricted to a certain weekend, but I know our members are out there afield all throughout the turkey season, so it doesn't have to line up always with that first weekend of turkey hunting. And quite frankly, last year from April 15th to May 31st, I think I was out in the turkey woods 30 mornings with other people. At this point in my life, it's more fun to mentor somebody new and see them smile and hear the wild. There's one kid I mentored from Chanhassen. He was with our mentored turkey hunt. He wanted to go bow hunting for turkeys, and in that morning, a rooster, a ringneck pheasant, crowed. He said, "What was that?" I said, and I was shocked. High school senior at Chanhassen High School did not know the sound of a rooster. I was hunting Camp Ripley with a veteran, had a rough grouse on a log drumming about 40 feet away. So many different sights and sounds in the spring turkey woods. And I shouldn't even tell you this, but I was hunting with one of my best friends a long time ago down by Lanesboro. We split up in the early days of my turkey hunting, and we came back together later. And he said, "What did you hear?" And I said, "I did not hear a turkey gobble. Did not hear it." I said, "But there was a farmer down in the valley trying to get his John Deere tractor started for at least an hour." He said, "You don't know what that sound was?" I said, "No, it sounded like he was, go, thump, 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 thump," and then it quit. And it's like, "Tom, that was a rough grouse." Well, I was a city kid from Coon Rapids, and I never was in the spring woods anywhere in Anoka County. And turkey hunting can open doors to the outdoors.
100%. And before I came into this role, I spent a lot of years doing wildlife research, literally capturing birds, putting satellite transmitters on them, releasing them into the wild. And I have to say, turkey hunting is the closest I have been to wildlife outside of physically capturing an animal, you know, because you're out there, you're dressed up like a shrub, you're making bird noises. I've had chickadees perched on caps. I've had hen turkeys come within 6 steps of where I'm sitting out on the ground, not in a blind, just on the ground. I've had hummingbirds nectaring, you know, maybe 6 inches from my ear because I'm tucked up in a honeysuckle bush. You know, it is the closest I've ever been to wildlife. And deer, I mean, deer are everywhere. I am firmly convinced that the deer and the turkeys are trading information because during deer season, all I ever see are turkeys, and during turkey season, all I ever see are deer. So there's an inside. I think we have a mole in the operation sharing that information because somebody's telling them the calendars and they're communicating about it. But if you want to get started now. It is March 1st. That means the season starts in about 6 weeks. Get your gear, get your ammo, start looking for ammo now. It's out there. A lot of it's on sale. Get to scouting, find your spots, get comfortable with what you're going to be using to take the animal. If it's a shotgun, get patterned, know how far out you can go, what's safe, what's ethical, and stick to it. So get practicing now because it is time. This stuff is right around the corner.
I've even heard rumor that some of the birds are gobbling.
I've already seen a picture of a bird in strut. I texted that. And really quickly, before I move on from this slide, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Minnesota Mentored Hunt Coordinator, Ralph Warzeka. Ralph spends so much of his time doing this stuff. He wants people to get birds more than he wants to get birds. He wants to connect people to this activity. He doesn't care where you're from or how you get there. If you're interested in turkeys, Ralph wants to talk to you. And Ralph puts on a lot of miles, he puts on a lot of hours and does a lot of great work. So I really appreciate him being involved with the Turkey Federation and what they do, because through Ralph's efforts, they've gotten a lot of people out going after birds. So we kind of covered that stuff, you know, and I want to talk a little bit about turkeys, and then I just kind of want to share some stories with Tom and get to the questions that we've got. As nice and as bright as the future is for turkeys in Minnesota, you know, there are some areas of the country that are seeing declines. You know, down in the southeast and in parts of the west, they're seeing declining numbers of turkeys. I believe that the Minnesota population is still expanding. I think we're still finding areas for them to fit into and grow. And you know, Tom talked earlier about that line of death. I mean, we've got birds pretty much almost everywhere in the state except for that far northeastern Arrowhead region. But even up there, I mean, I know there are birds in Grand Rapids, and so I suspect they're going to be working their way north and east. The National Wild Turkey Federation, they recently completed a 10-year national campaign. It's called Save the Habitat, Save the Hunt, and during that time, they protected over 5 million acres. They opened up access to 700,000 acres, and they got over 1.5 million people to go out and participate in these mentored hunts and other activities. So they've been doing a lot of tremendous work with this stuff. And because of the work that they've done nationally as well as locally here in Minnesota, I think we've got a lot of passionate folks that care about this stuff and want there to be healthy populations of turkeys for generations to come. So.
And we're doing a lot of research in the last 2-3 years now. There's been a big push on research on some of those areas where they felt there's declines. They're doing research in the Black Hills. They're doing research in Ohio and several other states. So some pretty major nesting success, recruitment success for turkeys to see if we can address some of these declines. I know a lot of the state agencies have pushed back their starting dates to hunting. Some of them have reduced bag limits. So far, we're not there. And I know we do get a lot of pressure in Minnesota. Some people, and I just heard it the other day again, it's like, when do we get to go to 2 birds? Well, we're still keeping an eye on our population. If you want more time in the woods where you think you want to shoot to, take somebody else out.
Yep. So that is the end of our presentation. This is my contact information. If you have any questions about this stuff, if you want to be put in contact with anybody for those mentored hunts, please reach out to me and I will make those connections. I'll make that happen. If you have any other questions about turkeys or wild turkey hunting, I'll be happy to talk to you about them. And so with that, I'm going to end our presentation and we're going to get to some of the questions that we've got in the Q&A, and I've got a couple of questions for Tom as well. So, now's the time. If you've got questions, pop them over in that Q&A. Let me see. So this is from Catherine. How have the DNR and NWTF protected our populations of turkeys and grouse against avian influenza? Have recent years seen population declines due to illness among flocks? A big part of that is basically having those really strong barriers between the domestic and the wild populations. Once that stuff hits the wild populations, we have a much harder time controlling it or even monitoring it. But this last round of outbreak that we had, there were a lot of really rigid protections that went into place. The domestic turkey producers were really aggressive with preventing the contact with outside birds. So
And
it's
the domestic producers also definitely feed their birds a medicated feed, so the feed that they get has probably antibiotics in it and stuff like that.
right.
And the NWTF just concluded we just did a symposium where we bring together biologists from all over the country. So they've met recently. So we've got a clearinghouse of sharing information between the state agencies and stuff. So they have not really seen that has been a factor yet. So
Yeah, and it's one of those things that with avian influenza, especially in wild bird populations, there are a lot of people that are paying a lot of attention to it, not just for turkeys, but for grouse, for pheasants, for a lot of wildlife, and even non-avian wildlife at this point, because we've seen some other animals coming down with it. So right now, there's a lot of information gathering that's going on, and it's very much rooted in trying to understand the extent and the magnitude of the problem, so that we can then go in and develop some strategies to deal with it. And Tom, I don't know if you're seeing this in the Q&A, but Tom Hackbarth is present on the webinar. So
he's my hero. He is my hero.
So thank you, Tom, for tuning in. A question from Janet. Please tell us more about the Metro Turkey Hunt program. Right now, there are multiple mentored hunts that occur within the Metro. I know the Dakota County Strutters organizes a mentored hunt. So a lot of those local chapters of the NWTF are the ones that are organizing those hunts. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out to me. I'll put you in contact with the mentor hunt coordinator with National Wild Turkey Federation, and we'll see if we can't get you involved in that. So
we also have the Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge hunt up there. You are required to go with an NWTF mentor, and we've got a gal, Nancy McLaughlin, is the chair of that event. Lance Morgan up in Chisago area. So we've got some that are close to the metro. I mean, we're not hunting these famous trailer park birds that got on CBS News.
yes, there was that recent one in Coon Rapids, the terror of Coon Rapids. It was assaulting residents trying to just get in and out of their homes, and they've got a turkey giving them grief. So Tom, how much do raccoon and possum affect nesting success?
Well, there's a big push now on trying to, with the declining trapping, people don't trap as much. And I would say raccoon and possum are more responsible for poor nesting success. A lot of people target coyote and fox, but coyote and fox actually go after raccoon and possum. So I'd say the raccoon and possum are probably number one and number two. And some of this research projects is probably going to confirm that.
So there is one that's in there that's not being talked about right now. But where do skunks fall into that?
They're right in there.
Yeah.
They're right in there, and supposedly I haven't seen it so much firsthand. There's legislation to do more banning on trapping, and if trapping does get banned, some of those critters are going to multiply and thrive and be harder on all ground nesting animals. I mean, it'd be waterfowl, pheasants, grouse. So.
Yeah. Yeah, eggs are a tremendous resource. They're a great source of protein. I eat chicken eggs all the time, and once that's a very vulnerable stage and of development and definitely a pinch point in population recruitment. A slightly different question: what are the turkey's main predators? So I'm guessing adult birds. I'm guessing adult birds here because we just talked about nest predators.
Well, I know on that research project that I just ran across the paperwork, they were reporting in the winter up in the Mille Lacs area, bobcats are a big predator. Coyote, yeah, if you've turkey hunted any length of time, when you're out there spring turkey hunting, it's kind of often that you may call in a coyote to the sounds and to your decoy. And so coyote, fox, but they're only going to catch one bird maybe once a week, once a month. They're going to go after other easier prey. Uh, well, even I would say golden eagles and bald eagles from time to time. I mean, you hear about that. So
I've heard of even I've heard great horned owls and barred owls going after them on occasion.
it seems like everybody and everything wants to eat a wild turkey. It's a tough
Yeah.
life.
It's tough being tasty, man. It's tough being tasty. The comment about the coyotes, yeah, just 2 springs ago, I actually I had a bird coming in, and I was hunting in some woods, and I wasn't exactly he was doing that thing where he would walk a little bit and gobble, and then he'd walk back a little bit and gobble, so I couldn't quite tell if he was coming or going. And I finally heard him and realized that he was on his way in, and I'm sitting there, and I'm getting ready, and I just hear this commotion, pop, 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 and he's up in this tiny little sapling right at the edge of the clearing of where I was at on the opposite side. And this thing's going back and forth like a ship's mast in a high wind because he's so heavy and this stick is so small. And there were 5 coyotes that were circling it like sharks. So those coyotes, I got busted by coyotes because as soon as he got up in those trees, he could see my entire decoy spread, and none of those birds were moving with coyotes all around. And eventually the coyotes scented me and took off, but I think he figured out that something wasn't right with that setup, and he didn't want to come in after that. So yeah, again, the stuff that you see when you're out there. Were there any concern of inbreeding or genetic issues from releasing such a small population when turkeys were reintroduced? No one has seen evidence of that yet. And so I think that's one of the things that until it starts manifesting, it's been so far so good, and the population has been really they've taken really well. They've been really healthy. Tom, you were telling me that the birds here in Minnesota, even though they're from those Missouri birds, they've become different over the last 50 years.
Well, one of the research projects that we did, or the DNR did down in Madelia, Minnesota, with Dr. Richard Kimmel, was they actually were putting turkeys in freezers. I want to say this correctly so nobody thinks we treated animals bad, but they found out turkeys can survive 40 degrees below zero. And that's not wind chill, that is actual temperature. Our turkeys in Minnesota grow an extra layer of feathers in the winter that the birds down south don't grow. So they've learned to adapt, or they've morphed into adapting a little bit better to handle the temperatures. One of the limiting factors for turkeys is available food sources in the winter. Uh, the NWTF provides seed corn for landowners to leave corn standing through the winters, because in the fall, when the acorns are dropping, you'll find turkeys foraging for acorns. In the spring, and nesting success in the spring has a lot to do with whether it's a cold or wet spring. If it's cold and wet, there won't be as many bugs. And little poults, when the poults are born, uh, they're not looking for seed as much. They're looking for bugs on the ground, because if you ever watch baby chicks run around, they're looking for something moving on the ground, and they see a bug, caterpillar, uh, grasshopper. Um, so when we have a lot of grasshoppers in the spring, we're going to have a good hatch. A lot of recruitment right there.
Nice. Indications are that the turkey population in the southeast is in decline, as noted by researchers like Dr. Mike Chamberlain. What indicators are telling us that the Minnesota population is going against that trend? And this kind of gets, we talked a little bit about this. You know, it it feels like first off, one of the things about the populations in the southeast and in Minnesota are very different. The populations in the southeast have been there for generations, and they were never completely extirpated from their range. So they've been there long enough that they've probably filled all the available spots that we've got going around. Up here in Minnesota, they've only been on the landscape for 50 years, and so they're still expanding into new areas. They're still expanding into new habitat niches that they haven't. It doesn't appear that they've filled up all the available area just yet. Um, you know, things that are down there, they're these big overarching factors that affect all wildlife moving forward, and that's climate change, habitat loss, and disease. And so those things are all looming in the future for everything. And one of the things about the southeast is that when you've got all those areas filled with birds, because they never left, they got to fill all those areas a long time ago. As we move forward with more and more habitat loss that we see, it's a much more marked impact on the population, because we're taking those spots away from those birds. So I think that's one of the big things that's driving some of those declines down in the southeast. We've seen explosions of cities in the southeast. I mean, Atlanta, Charlotte, um, Birmingham, Nashville. I mean, I'm not that old, and I remember when Nashville was a sleepy little city in central Tennessee, and now it takes forever to get across that town. So
Kind of one of the fastest growing cities in America.
absolutely. And it's almost turning into, how there's that just mega corridor from New York City to Boston. I mean, we're kind of seeing that from Atlanta to Charlotte, like creeping on up into towards Virginia and DC, and it's that chews into habitat, and so we're losing. It's more impactful when all the spaces are occupied and you start taking away some of those spaces versus not all the spaces are occupied, and so the birds still have room to expand even when some of those spaces are being removed, if that makes sense.
One of the changes in the southeast that you may not have seen, James, is back in the 80s and 90s when I hunted down there, was dairy cows were pastured, and you'd be hunting turkeys near or in pastures, and you'd see the cow pies flipped over, and turkeys have been in there digging for bugs. And anecdotally too, they used to call it in the winter the hot lunch program for wild turkeys, where the farmer would take the manure and go run the manure spreader out there in the field, and probably 15 minutes after he had thrown that manure out in the field, turkeys would be out there feeding in any kind of waste corn or waste grain in the manure. So I don't know if that's a decline in a food source for the wild turkey or not, but to some degree it is.
Yeah, and yeah, they do. They love it when not just manure spreading, but when farmers are out there, they disc up the field to get ready to plant. They'll be out there scratching around because that's turned over a lot of dirt that has grubs and bugs in it that they want to get at. I've seen them love a freshly burned field because they're getting out, they're getting barbecued grasshoppers and everything else. They like it just like we do. So it's and that's one of the really amazing things about turkey hunting is that, you know, if you're going to hunt these birds, you got to pay attention to what they're doing. You got to see where they're going and what they're cueing in on, and it just opens up this whole world of observation that, you know, if I wasn't out there turkey hunting, I wouldn't see this stuff. You know, 2-3 springs ago, we were hunting down in the state forest right outside of Rushford, and my buddy took me on a bit of a hike up and down some of that bluffland country. But coming back, we were coming up this slope, and it was a really warm day. It was that really warm opener, I think 2-3 years ago, and there were tricolored bumblebees everywhere. I mean, I couldn't take 5 steps without seeing another tricolored bumblebee, and these are really cute little. They're big. They've got this bright orange spot on their back. They're not rusty patches, but I never would have I never would have seen those bees if I hadn't been out there turkey hunting, and it's just an amazing time to be out there. What's the best time of day to hunt, Tom?
Any time of day, but a lot of times from 9 to noon is great because those gobblers fly up to roost in the evening. They roost in the trees somewhere near where they know there are hens. So they fly down, the hens go with them. They spend the morning for the first 2-3 hours with the hens. It's hard, not impossible, but hard to pull a gobbler away from a girlfriend. So after those girlfriends may go off and go lay an egg or go do other things, 9 to noon's a great time to go turkey. Stay out there, and it kind of goes back to even afternoons. For a long time, I'll have to say this: I was a proponent of not extending hunting all day. We used to only hunt till noon, and I thought, wow, it's a long enough day. You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. By noon you're tired, and it's like take a nap, go into town to eat, um, and or go trout fishing. So I tell you what, the wild turkey made a lot of people from the Twin Cities discover trout fishing in southeastern Minnesota. So I'm proud of the fact that the organization has been a stakeholder. The DNR has listened to us over time, and we've worked together and make turkey hunting the best it can be. I was going to say on the wall of my office, there's a declaration or a signed document by Governor Tim Pawlenty that changed the law that you can assist a wild turkey hunter in the field. It used to be illegal unless you had a license in the same zone or time period to go hunt with somebody. Now we can mentor, we can take other people out, we can show them around. Show them the ropes, as you might say.
Excellent. We are wrapping up. It is getting close to 1. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I've shared the poll results with everybody, so if you've hung on for this amount of time, you can see what those results look like. I just want to say, as somebody who has gotten a lot out of turkey hunting and has really appreciated it, thank you, Tom, for all the work that you and the NWTF have done. You know, the real magic to this effort comes from the fact, for me, comes from the fact that DNR and Turkey Federation and dedicated volunteers around the state came together to accomplish something that none of them could have done on their own. And I think that's a powerful message, and it's just a testament to what can get done when we work together and to try to accomplish some mutual goals. So thank you very much.
Well, James, I kind of want to close on that note about the celebration that we're doing in Caledonia, Minnesota on July 22nd in the far southeast corner. It's where it all began, and that's where we're going to celebrate. We're throwing a big celebration and dedication ceremony for this partnership between the state agency, the Minnesota DNR, and the NWTF. So 2 o'clock, July 22nd, be in Caledonia. Uh, we we expect the governor to be there, commissioner of the DNR, my bestie that I took out turkey hunting. I think it was 2019.
It was
She shot her first turkey.
a good one.
So we're
Yeah.
throwing a party that celebrates 50 years of conservation in Minnesota, the restoration of the wild turkey. Everybody that wants to go turkey hunting gets to go.
Yeah.
Everybody gets to
and
go.
and that's just so amazing. And y'all are all invited. Everybody show up. Tom promised me off screen that he was going to get everybody a turkey next spring if you show up.
Oh wow, that's a big order to fill.
That's hyperbolic. I don't be pestering him about taking you out. But it is a fantastic time if you're interested. Even if you're just curious about it, just going and sitting along with somebody and watching their process and watching how this happens. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to see stuff that you're just not going to see otherwise. And it's a tremendous thing to do. And so, Tom, thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. I apologize about the hiccup to start the talk, but it's been tremendous to hear your lived experiences and all the stuff that y'all have done to get us to where we're at today. So thank you very much.
Well, real quickly too, and it's a story I kind of want to write. Is it really hit me that last spring? We're only in the third generation of turkey hunters in Minnesota. Back in the 80s and 90s, people my age learned how to do it. In the 2000s and the 2010s, we taught our kids. Now I've switched to taking my grandkids. So we are only in the third generation. And there's a lot of grandpas and grandmas taking grandkids out now. And it's pretty special when you get your grandkids a turkey.
Yeah, and one day I want to have you come back because I want to hear some of those stories of the early days of turkey hunting, some of the strategies that y'all employed. Because I mean, the stuff that we've got, the decoys we've got, the technology we've got. I mean, y'all are doing this with like plastic bags on sticks as decoys and
And
just
woodland camo.
and woodland camo. It'd be tremendous to hear some of that stuff. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Next week, we've got another fantastic webinar coming up, and I'm going to turn off our record, and we're going to get this posted. And y'all get out there turkey hunting. Good luck, be safe, and we'll see you. We'll see you next week. So thank you so much for everybody. And Tom, you have a great day, sir.
Thank you.